Hey everybody, it's Justin, and today I want to show you guys this Lightning web component tutorial. What we're doing here is we're rebuilding the standard contact list view and then adding a couple of additional features as well. What this is it's a really good tutorial, an introduction tutorial on Lightning web components using standard components like the data table, Lightning input, as well as how to really effectively use the data table specifically. So we have the ability to select various rows. I built a custom delete selected contacts, which we'll be showing. We have text search through a SOQL query, so we're able to search through that. We have a reactive selected contacts, and we also have row actions, so we can delete a row through an action. We can delete multiple rows through deleting selected contacts. And again, all of this is responsive. And additionally, we can create a new contact, which just pulls up the create record page. So with that, I'm going to be jumping into a new org and VS Code, so I can show you how to build all of this from scratch. So see you there. Okay, so we are in VS Code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create project. So it's SFDX create project. We are going to use the standard template and the project name. I'm just going to call it contact list view. And we'll go ahead and create project. Of course, the next thing we want to do is authenticate. So we're going to do SFDX authorize. What I'm going to do is the production URL, since I am using a developer org. And then the alias is just going to be contact list view, I guess, nothing crazy. You're going to go ahead and log in as you do. And okay, great. We have the org set up successfully. Now with Lightning web component development, I would highly recommend doing the following configuration inside of Salesforce Setup. So the first thing we need to do is go to Session Settings inside of Setup, and you're going to be looking all the way at the top for this setting right here: enable secure and persistent browser caching to improve performance. Make sure this is unchecked and save, of course. And then what this does is every time you reload, you'll be forced to the component will be forced to reload, which will be helpful when you're trying to make massive changes. And I already had this setting set up, so no need to save it here. But the other thing is you need to go to debug mode here in Lightning Components subfolder. And you're going to click on your username and then make sure that you enable the this debug mode. And you'll see this here, Lightning Components debug mode enabled. These are highly useful features when you're doing development. Next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating all the classes that we need. So I'm just going to go ahead and create the Apex class first, just because it popped up. So it's going to be contact list view helper. And then I'm also going to create a Lightning web component called contact list view. I'm going to go ahead and set up the meta here, the metadata. So we're going to change this to true. And we are also going to add some targets. And this is what exposes this to the different sources. And so the source that we're going to allow this to expose it to is lightning tab, like this. Make sure you're using the correct spelling. And what this does is this allows us to use this Lightning Web Component as a tab. The other thing here is I'm just going to add a header of hello world just so we can see that this is working. I'm going to go ahead and deploy this so we have this inside of Salesforce. And I'm going to go back to Salesforce inside Setup. We're going to go to Tabs. And we're going to add this as a tab. So we just need to go to Lightning Component Tabs. So I'll just do I'll call it Contact List View. Make sure to select the right component here. And then we're going to use the tried and true airplane tab style, as that is unequivocally the best one. And with that, we're going to save this. And now what you'll notice if you go to the app launcher and we search for the contact list view, then we'll see this hello world right here in the top right. I know it's a little hard to see on this background. But with that, we can start working on the HTML for what we need for the component. So I'm going to go ahead and go into VS Code, and we're going to do a couple things. So I'm going to remove this header as we won't need it. I'm going to make a lightning card. This is probably the best way. I'm going to go ahead and add a title. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a div with the slot of actions. And we're going to create 2 lightning buttons. And we'll do the first one as create contact with an on-click method of navigate to new record page, and we will make the second one as delete selected contacts. And then we're going to use the method of delete selected contacts. I'm going to go ahead and deploy this. So what we've done here is we've created a lightning card, which is what is kind of the bread and butter for displaying components inside of Salesforce. And that just gives it this white background. The next thing we did is we gave this a title. So I called this custom contact list view. You could obviously call this whatever you want. And then I created 2 buttons and put them in the action slot inside the component. And if you want to read more about that, you can see that at the Lightning Web Component component library. And you can read the documentation there. Links will be down below in the description. The next thing we're going to be doing is I'm going to be making the inner body. So I'm going to call this SLDS card body inner. And of course, it doesn't work. And what this will do is this will style the body inner to the Salesforce spec through the SLDS style sheet. Again, links in description if you want to read more on that. Going to make a section here for selected contacts. And then I'm going to have the variable as selected contacts len. And then I'm going to have another class which is going to use quite a few styles here, bottom extra small. And then we're going to have a lightning input of type search, and then we're going to have the onChange method be handle search, and I'll be making all of these once we get to the JavaScript. And the last thing we'll need for the HTML is we're going to need the lightning datatable. And this is what this is the component that's used to display all the data. So we need a key field, which I'm going to use as ID. And of course, I need to make sure this is in here. The next thing we're going to need is data, which I'm going to pass in contacts. We're going to need columns, which I'm going to pass in as cols. We're going to need an on-row selection, which I'm going to use the handle row selection. And we'll need an on-row action, which I'm going to be using handle row action. So with that, I'm going to deploy this, and this will be the HTML complete inside of the contact list view. Now, what you'll notice is a couple things. Is one, if I try to use any of these, nothing actually works because we haven't implemented anything. And you might get errors like this trying to call the methods. The next thing that you'll notice is that this kind of funky box right here is the data table. And because this is all data driven, what we'll need to do is we'll need to supply this with not only the columns that are displayed, but also the data. So let's go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do here is just show you how to do the first ones. So I'm going to make a constant called cols, all uppercase, and this is going to take an array of objects. So should call it name. The label is going to be name, the field name. I'm going to call this link, lowercase. And we'll just go ahead and deploy this to source and then show you what this looks like here. Okay, what you'll see here is that there's no columns here. Well, why is that? Well, because what we actually need to do is we need to do one more thing, which is where inside of the class we assign cols all lowercase to the constant cols. And so now, if we deploy this, then we will see all of the columns. We happen to have one, which is just name. But there you go. This works as expected. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to add the type as URL. That way we can click on it. So we're going to change the type to URL. Note that this actually defaults to the type of text as per the documentation. we'll also need to do a type attributes key, which will take in an object, which will have a key of label, which will take in another object, which will take in his field name. The field name will be full name. Note that this needs to be case sensitive. We now go ahead and finish out the rest of the I'm going to go ahead and finish out the rest of the columns here. So we'll need an email, which is going to have a field name of email. We'll need a account, which is going to be very similar to how the contact is set up, the contact name is set up, but instead of link, we're going to call it account link, and then instead of the full name, we're going to use the account name, and then make sure to have a comma at the end. And the last thing we need is, or we need two more things, so we're going to need a mailing address. And we'll need a actions. So this is the this is what shows up as the final row or final column in the row. And this is actually a little bit different. So we don't need a label because it won't be necessary. It'll be pretty obvious. I'm going to call the field name actions. And we need a type of action. And we'll need the type attributes, which will again take in a object here. And we need a row actions, the constant actions. Now I haven't defined actions, so let's define that right now. So I'm going to do const actions, if I can type today. And we'll just have this pretty simple. So it's going to take a label of delete, and it'll take a name of delete lowercase. So now if I go ahead and deploy this, then we can see all the columns that show up. So great. Next thing we're going to want to do is we are going to want to display data from the Salesforce environment. So the way that we do that is we get data through Aura-enabled methods. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import the wire function inside of Lightning Web Component. And I'm going to go to the contact list view helper, the Apex class that we've made earlier on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the constructor method as this isn't needed. I will keep the with sharing keyword as this helps with enforcing role hierarchies. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do @Aura-enabled, and I have a little template here, but we're going to have the cacheable equals true, similar to how like the @isTest is denoted with CL data equals true. We want this public, we want it static. What we want is instead of returning a string, we want to return a list of contact, and we're going to call this get contacts. And the way this will work is we're going to do a pretty simple SOQL query where we just say select ID from contact, but I want a few more fields besides ID, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste these in. So I'm going to want the first name, the contact's first name, the contact's last name, the contact's account ID. I'll want the contact's account name. So this is using the like dot operator on the related object. we want to use get the mailing street, city, state, postal code, country, as well as email. And I'm going to go ahead and format this a little bit. And I'm just going to go ahead and set a limit of 1,000 as if you're in a production org, you might see issues if you're not setting some sort of limit on the contacts that you're getting. And with that, I'm going to deploy this. And we're going to go back to the JavaScript here, and we'll actually import this function. So the way that that works is that we have import, and this I'm going to call the method get contacts, and we're going to do from, and the path is at Salesforce/Apex, and then slash the class name. So in this case, it's contact list view helper. And we need to do the method. So the method is dot and then get contacts. With that, we're able to wire in data. So I'm going to have the data be called contacts, similar to what we have here. So we have the data contacts, and that's where it's coming in from. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to call the wire service. So it's decorator of @wire, and then it's going to be the method. This method is get contacts. And we're going to pass this into a function. So I prefer to do it on a new line. I'm going to call the function contacts wire, and this is going to take a result. So like how we have result, what we want to do is, it's actually considered best practice if you're going to be refreshing the data, which I'll show later on, to have the result actually saved to a property. So I'll make this wired contacts as a property as well. Do a semicolon for good measure, and we're going to say this dot wired contacts equals result. Additionally, the way that results handled is it is handled through it is passed in as an object that has a data and an error key. So what we'll do is we'll just say if result.data, then we'll handle data, and then we'll also just do if result.error. Then what we want to do is we'll just probably console.error the result.error. Now to handle the data, we're getting a list of contacts. So what I want to do is I want to say that this dot contacts equals result dot data. And I'm going to go ahead and deploy this and show you what this looks like. Now what you'll see here is that when you have everything working, we have rows, so we happen to have quite a few rows of data. Now the challenge is that you'll notice that the email field works because we're actually using that standard field, but the name doesn't work, the account doesn't work, the mailing doesn't work. And that's because we do a lot of work with the JavaScript to make this data correct. So what I'm going to do is we're actually going to map this. So I'm going to call the .map function. And this map function takes in a function as a parameter. So I'm actually going to do an arrow function, which takes in row. And the arrow function has a parameter of row, and we're actually going to return this dot map contacts of row. And we'll go ahead and create the function map contacts. We're just going to take in a row, And we will just console.log the row for now, just so we can look at the data. Go ahead and add some semicolons since they're so useful. And if I open the developer console, what you'll see is you'll see all the various rows of the data. So we have the various keys, so like account ID, email, first name, ID, last name. What you'll also notice is that we don't have the context anymore. This is because we're not returning the right data. So how do we return the right data? Well, the first thing we'll need to do is we'll need to return an object, and we'll just do the spread of the row. So again, if we do this, then we can see the data, which is great, of what we had before. But now what we're able to do is at an individual row, we're able to map the data to what we need. So if I go back into VS Code, then we'll want to map fields to full name, account name, link, account link, mailing address. So how do we do that? Well, let's get the full name working first. For full name, this will be pretty straightforward, but I'll do a key called full name, make sure to use the correct punctuation, and then I will use the backticks here to have string literals, and we'll use the row.firstname, and we'll use the row.lastname. And if I do that, then we can see the full name being populated here. But what you'll notice is there's still nothing to show here. And although if we go and click on full name, if I refresh again, and if we click on full name, oh, because we're not consoling the row. Yeah, so we won't see this data in the debug. And we also won't see it here because we need to have the link set up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a link field. And this is going to use string literals again. And this is / and then the row ID. So row.id like this. And now that we have both of these fields, which are required for the name, then what you'll see is that we have the full name set up already. And additionally, if we click on this, then we can go to the contact. So that's already working. Let's go ahead and get the account working. Now, the account column. What's different here is that because account isn't required, now, you know, if you're working on a large org, you probably have account as a required field, but in standard Salesforce, an account isn't required. So because of that, we'll actually have to check for the account ID. So the way that I like to do this is I have a var of account name, which is going to equal empty string, and we'll also have a var of account ID, which is going to equal an empty string. What we'll do is we'll just say if row.account ID does not equal undefined, then we'll set the account name, or we'll set the account ID equal to, actually, I think the better way to do this instead of account ID is account link. So that way we just generate it here. So we'll set the account link equal to the string literal of the row.account ID, and we'll set the account name equal to row.account and then name. So that will work, and then let's add that to the return statement as well. So we'll want account link key be the account link data, and we'll want the account name be the account name data. And if I go ahead and refresh, then we'll see that this works. And again, we're able to click on a various company. So great, that works just as expected. The last thing is mailing address. Now the thing to note with mailing address and working with the data inside of Salesforce is that when data from Apex is null, that gets passed to the data that's null in the database, it gets passed to the front end, gets shown as undefined like this. However, when you actually print the data, then it prints as the undefined string, which is not very pretty looking, and you don't want the address to show up as, you know, undefined, undefined, undefined. So the way that we counter that is that we go and check if it's undefined for every single variable. So what I've done here is I've just copy pasted the street, and I've done it the opposite way, but instead of checking for that it doesn't equal undefined, which you need to do this way here because you have a key error if you do it this way. But here it doesn't matter. So we just do row mailing street. If it equals undefined, then we set the street to blank and city and state and country and zip code. With that, I'll go ahead and add the mailing address down here. So we'll have mailing address as the string literal of street, city, state, country, zip code, which I'll just copy paste. And so now if I deploy this, then we have all of the data showing up correctly, which is great and just what we want. The next thing we'll want to do is we'll want to get the selected contacts working. So right now, if I select anything, we're going to get this error. The reason why we're getting this error is that if you remember in the HTML, we have the handle row selection be the method. Well, it can't find a handle row selection. So if I go ahead and create that as a function right now and have the parameter as event, and then just go ahead and deploy this for now just so to show, then what you'll notice is that now we don't get that error, which is great. So what we'll need to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a property called selected contacts. So I'm going to call this selected contacts here. And if I go back down here, then we'll say this dot selected contacts equals event dot detail dot selected rows. And this is a great way of using standard functionality to go and get the selected contacts. The next thing that I'll want to do is get the contacts len property set up. So instead of having it as a property like this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say get, which just makes it a computed property, and we're going to call it selected contacts len as a function. And now what I want to do is I want to do a null check. So I want to say if this dot selected contacts equals undefined, then return 0. Otherwise, we're going to return this dot selected contacts dot length, because again, undefined doesn't have a length property, so that's why you want to do this null check. So now what you'll see is if I refresh, then we have the selected contacts as 0, and it's responsive. So if I select all of them, I have 21, 0, 1, 2, etc. Great. The next thing I want to do is I want to set up the search function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to the bottom here. I'm going to make an async function as we'll want to await the database search, and I'm going to call this handle search, which is going to take in an event. So similar to, we have the onChange method is going to be handle search. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if event.target.value equals an empty string, well, what we want to do is we want this dot contacts equals to this dot base data. Now we don't have the any base data property, so let's go ahead and create a base data property really fast. And why do we have this? Well, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be mutating the data inside of the table. And so because of that, we want a base state of the table. So I'm going to go back to the contacts wire, and then after the map is done, I'm going to say this dot base data equals this dot contacts. And so that way we'll have a base state. The reason why we have this as blank is because if you're deleting the value, then you want to return to the base state. And then I'm going to make an else if event.target.value.length. So what this is the string. So if I search for test, then event.target.value is going to be test. And then we want a length property. So we want the string length. I'm going to say it's greater than 1, as the minimum length to search for a SOQL query is 2. So that works. We're going to set a const of search contacts equal to a wait search contact, and that'll take in a couple parameters. Now, the thing is we don't have the search contact method, so let's go ahead and make that. So let's go back to Apex, and I'm going to go ahead and again make an or enabled method. We do want cacheable equals true, and we want to make this return a list of contacts, and we'll call this search contact. And we need a parameter of the search string. So what I want to do is I'm going to make a list of lists of S objects. And this is going to be contacts. And this is going to be a SOQL query. So we're going to do find search string in all fields, returning all the fields that we need. So great. So we want to return this. So I'm going to return the wrapped value of list of contacts, as it's not technically a list of contacts, it's a list of S objects. So we can cast it as a list of contacts, and we can say contacts 0, as it's in the list of lists, the 0th index. So I'll go ahead and deploy this. And so now what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to import this method. So instead of get contacts though, it's going to be called search contact, and we're going to use the search contact method. So now if we go back to our handle search method, we want to use the, we need to set all the parameters. So the way that this works is you want the parameter name, in this case it's search string, as a object, and then the object's value is going to be event.target.value. With that, we want to map the contacts. So, and we want to put the contacts as into the data. So we want this.contacts equals the search contacts constant, but we need to map these because we had to do all the various data. So we'll map this as a row and then arrow function, and then we'll return this dot map contacts, which takes in a row. We need to have the correct property. So the correct property is search string, not search. And now if I deploy this, then we will refresh, and we will see that we are no longer getting errors. So now if I search for Justin, it's working. Great, perfect. The next thing I'm going to work on is a create contact button, and then we'll finally work on the deleting method. So the way that, before we do that, let's go back to the map contacts. And I'm just going to go ahead and remove the console.log, as we won't need to see that information anymore. The way that contacts are created is that we are going to use the navigation mixin. The benefit of using the navigation mixin is that we will be able to leverage a lot of the standard Salesforce functionality. Specifically, we'll be able to use the same create record page. That's the page layout that you get when you edit and create a record, and that way we're not redoing a bunch of work. The way we do that, the way we use the navigation mixin is we have we extend the navigation mixin when pass in a lightning element. And of course, we need to import the navigation mixin. Make sure you're having this in curly braces. The next thing we'll need to do is I'll need to create the navigate to new record page function. So let's go ahead and define that right now. And what we're going to do is we're going to say this for the navigation mixin.navigate, capitalized, and then this is going to take in a function, which is going to take in a object which is going to have type, is going to be the standard object page like this, and we're going to have a key of attributes, which is going to take an object as the value, and the object's going to have two keys, so it's going to have the object API name punctuated like this. We can just use contact. Now, if you're using custom objects, I'd recommend actually importing the API name, but for standard objects, this is fine to hard code like this, and we'll just say the action name is new, and that's what will allow us to create a new contact. Okay, so with that, now if we do the create contact button, then you'll see we get the standard list view, or sorry, the standard record detail view to go and create a contact. So the last thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be implementing the delete selected contacts method, as well as the delete on the row action So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring up Visual Studio. And for the delete contacts, I'm going to make an OR enabled. I think the key thing here is that we don't want cacheable to be true. When you're working with DML statements, you do not want the cacheable to be true. We're going to do public static. It's going to be void, and we're going to call this delete contacts. And I want to pass in a list of IDs. I think this is probably the cleanest way of managing this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if contact IDs dot size is greater than 0, then I'm going to delete select ID from contact where ID in contact IDs. So pretty straightforward SOQL query, but I think Occam's razor dictates that this is probably one of the best ways to implement this. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to import this into the Lightning Web Component here. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the row delete first. So the way that's going to work is we're going to have a handle row selection, or sorry, not handle row action event, which is going to have an event as a parameter, and then we're going to say delete contacts, and this is going to take in contact IDs, and what we need is we need to send a list of IDs. And so if we do event.detail.row.id, we do get an ID. However, this is just a contact ID. And because I want to be able to do a list of IDs, we're just going to actually turn this into a list, and then this will work accordingly. With that, we can actually delete a contact here inside of the table here. Now, the challenge is that when we delete a row here, then there's not going to be any, the table's not going to update because the data is not responsive. And so the way that we handle that is we basically just use the promise architecture. So we just say .then, and this is going to take in a function. I'm just going to do an empty arrow function here, and we're going to use the refresh apex module. So we just do that by import refresh apex like this. And let me make sure I get the, yep, and then this is from Salesforce /apex. Perfect. And so what we'll do is we'll just say refresh apex, and we want to refresh this dot wired contacts, so that so the wired result, or the wired data here, the wired result that we had set to the wired contacts property before, we want to just make a call to the database using refresh apex to make this reactive. So now if I go ahead and deploy and go into Salesforce, we can see that if I go and delete my record view, then, delete from the table, what we'll see is that this, might take a little bit of time, and that's why we have that then, because it's not, because we need it in synchronous, but we will delete a record. So great. The last thing that I want to do is I want to be able to pass these into the delete selected contacts. So the way that we do that is we have we're going to create another method, which is going to say, which is going to be called delete selected contacts. And we don't need any parameters here. And I'm going to have a var ID list, which is going to equal this dot selected contacts, because we want all of the selected contacts. But since I just want the IDs, what I'm going to do is I'm going to map them. And so I'm just going to say the row is going to equal, for each row, we want to return row.id. And we probably don't even need to have this be a var. Yeah, this can even be a constant here. And I'm gonna call the delete contacts, and this is going to do this, and then we're gonna have the contact IDs take in the ID list, and then we're gonna have a dot then, and this is gonna take in an empty arrow function, and we want to refresh apex. And we'll refresh the wired contacts. The last thing is what you'll notice is with what's only implemented here is that the contacts would still be selected and the rows would be selected. So what we want to do is we want to say this.template, which basically is how we access the DOM. And we want to use the query selector method like this. And we're going to get the lightning-datatable. And we're going to have the selected rows equal an empty array. And that way we clear out everything that's selected. Furthermore, what we want to do is we want to have this dot selected contacts equals undefined. And now I believe some of these have cases. So what I'll do is I'll make two. I'll make two test contacts here. Let's see if they have global actions somewhere. New contact, test 2. And then now if I go ahead and refresh, then what we'll see is we'll see these two contacts. And if I go ahead and delete the selected contacts, then they get deleted. And again, to furthermore see that they've been deleted, if we go to the recycling bin, we can see them deleted. With that, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on how to recreate the contact list view. If you did, please hit the like button. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to leave a comment down below. And with that, I'll see you next time.